It was a crisp Saturday morning in the sleepy suburb of Willow Creek, the kind of day where the sun spilled golden light over manicured lawns and the air carried the faint hum of distant lawnmowers. I'd just gotten back from a bike ride around the neighborhood, my legs pleasantly tired from pedaling through the winding streets. My bike is sleek, black mountain model I'd saved up for wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and I loved it. I propped it against the side of my front porch, its tires VY-ing faint dirt streaks on the concrete, and headed inside for a glass of water. I didn't give a second thought. Why would I? It was my yard, my house, my bike. Big mistake. I hadn't even kicked off my sneakers when I heard it. A sharp, theatrical saw from outside. My stomach sank. I knew that sound. I crept to the window, peering through the blinds like a spy in a bad movie, and there she was, Eleanor Pratt, the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek's community standards. She stood at the edge of my property line, arms crossed so tightly her floral blouse strained at the seams, her pinched face radiating disapproval. Her graying hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes, those cold, hawk-like eyes, were locked on my bike like it was a dead raccoon I'd left to rot. I groaned inwardly. I'd only lived in this neighborhood for 3 months, but Eleanor had already made it clear she was the type to turn a molehill into Mount Everest. I tried to ignore her, hoping she'd get bored and shuffle back to her pristine beige bungalow next door. Wishful thinking. A moment later, a knock, sharp and insistent, rattled my front door. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and opened it. Eleanor didn't waste a second. "You can't leave that saw there," she declared, jabbing a bony finger toward my bike like she was accusing of treason. I blinked, caught off guard. "Leave what where?" She huffed, her nostrils flaring dramatically. "Your bicycle saw. In your yard. It's not allowed." I glanced at my bike, then back at her, trying to process the absurdity. "Says who?" Eleanor straightened up, her posture snapping into something almost militaristic. "The Homeowners Association regulations clearly state that all personal vehicles, including bicycles, must be stored out of public VYEW. It's about preserving the aesthetic integrity of Willow Creek." She said aesthetic integrity like it was some sacred oath, her voice dripping with sanctimony. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "It's a bike, Eleanor, not a rusted-out pickup truck on cinder blocks." Her lips pursed into a thin, quivering line. "That doesn't matter. Rules are rules." I crossed my arms, feeling a spark of defiance ignite. "I've read the HOA guidelines cover to cover twice, actually, because I couldn't sleep one night and nowhere does it say I can't park my bike on my own property." Her left eye twitched, just a flicker, but it was enough to tell me I'd hit a nerve. "It implied saw," she snapped, enunciating the word like I was too dense to grasp it. "Implied?" I raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorframe. "That's not how rules work." She let out a sharp, exasperated breath, her hands balling into fists. "Fine. I'll be filing an official complaint with the HOA. You'll see." With that, she spun on her heel and marched off, her sensible loafers clicking against the pavement like tiny war drums. I shut the door, shaking my head. "Knock yourself out," I muttered to the empty room. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I stepped outside to grab the newspaper and found a bright orange violation notice taped to my door, the adhesive so aggressive it left a sticky residue when I yanked it off. Saw unauthorized outdoor storage. Immediate removal required. Saw below the typed text, in handwriting so precise it could only belong to Eleanor, was a scrawled addendum. Saw failure to comply will result in further action. Saw I crumpled the paper in my fist, irritation simmering in my chest. She'd actually done it. She turned my bike into a neighborhood scandal. That's when I decided I wasn't going to play nice anymore. If Eleanor wanted a fight, I'd give her one she'd never forget. Instead of MOVYing the bike, I drove to the local sporting goods store and bought a second Oni hulking, neon green monstrosity with fat tires and a frame so oversized it looked like it belonged in a monster truck rally. I parked it right next to the first, snapped a photo of the duo gleaming in the morning light, and emailed it to the HOA with a single line, "Saw define outdoor storage." so then I sat back and waited. Eleanor's reaction was immediate and explosive. I was in my kitchen, sipping coffee, when I heard her voice shrill and furious outside. I peeked through the blinds and saw her pacing my lawn, a measuring tape in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She was measuring the bikes, muttering to herself as she scribbled notes like a detective at a crime scene. I stepped outside, still in my flannel pajama pants, and couldn't resist. "Eleanor, need some help with that?" She whipped around, her eyes blazing. "I am saw gathering EVY Denke saw," she hissed. "For what?" I asked, biting back a grin. "Are my bikes VY OLADing some secret zoning law now?" She ignored me, bending down to measure the distance between the bike tires and my porch. Finally, she stood up, triumphant. "You're in violation of the 24-inch rule." I blinked. "The what?" "The rule that states no personal items may extend more than 24 inches beyond the front plane of the house," she said, tapping her clipboard for emphasis. I stared at her, incredulous. "Eleanor, that rule's for fences and permanent structures. A bike isn't a structure." She didn't flinch. "A bicycle saw is a structure." I covered my mouth to stifle a laugh. "That's your opinion." At that moment, my neighbor Jake ambled over from across the street, a lanky guy with a perpetual grin and a knack for stirring the pot. He carried a rolled-up yoga mat under his arm, his latest hobby, and took in the scene. Eleanor with her clipboard, me with my pajamas, and the two bikes gleaming defiantly. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone dripping with mock innocence. Eleanor jabbed a finger at the bikes. "Illegal outdoor storage." Jake nodded slowly, then set the yoga mat down on his own lawn, unrolling it with exaggerated care. "So, Eleanor," he said, stretching out on it like a sunbathing cat, "is this a structure too?" Her jaw dropped. I smirked, folding my arms. "Good question." She stormed off without another word, her clipboard trembling in her grip. I thought that might be the end of it. It wasn't. That night, I was sprawled on my couch, halfway through a bag of chips, when I heard rustling outside. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window, peering into the darkness. There she was, Eleanor, sneaking across my lawn with a roll of yellow caution tape. I watched, slack-jawed, as she began taping off my bikes like they were radioactive waste. I flicked on the porch light and stepped outside. "Eleanor, what the hell are you doing?" She froze, the tape dangling from her hands, then spun around with a wild look in her eyes. "Citizen's arrest," she shouted, pointing at me like I'd just confessed to a felony. I gaped at her. "For what?" "Illegal obstruction of community space," she bellowed. Jake, who'd apparently been watching from his porch with a beer in hand, nearly spit it out. "Eleanor, you can't arrest someone over a bike." She ignored him, fumbling with her phone. "I've already called the authorities. When they get here, you'll be forced to comply." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "You call the police? Over this?" She smirked, triumphant. "Yes, and you'll see." A squad car rolled up minutes later, its lights casting eerie shadows across the street. The Afikara stocky guy, with tired eyes and a buzz cut, climbed out, already looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He adjusted his belt and trudged over. "All right, what's the emergency?" Eleanor pointed dramatically at the bikes, the caution tape fluttering in the breeze. "He's unlawfully obstructing the VY Sewell harmony of our neighborhood." The officer blinked, then turned to me. "Sir," I gestured toward the bikes. "They're parked in my yard." He nodded, took a deep breath, and faced Eleanor. "Ma'am, this isn't a police matter." She gasped, clutching her chest. "Not a police matter? Do you understand the severity he saw of what's happening?" Jake piped up, grinning. "Yeah, officer, he's causing some serious bicycle devastation out here." The officer sighed a long, weary sound. "Ma'am, unless these bikes are committing a crime, I suggest you let this go." Eleanor's face turned a furious shade of red. "This is an outrage." "Good night, ma'am," the officer said, turning back to his car. She stood there, fuming, as he drove off. I glanced at Jake. "So what now?" He grinned, raising his beer. "I say we triple the bike count." Eleanor shrieked, a sound that echoed through the quiet night, but she wasn't done. The police brushing her off only seemed to stoke her fire. The next morning, I was still groggy from sleep when a pounding shook my door. Not a polite knock, but the kind you'd expect from a SWAT team. I opened it to find 3 HOA board members standing there, looking like they'd rather be at a root canal. The leader, a balding guy named Tom, sighed he vyly. Look, I know this is ridiculous, but we need to talk about your bike situation. I raised an eyebrow. My bike situation? Tom rubbed his temples. Eleanor's filed a formal complaint. Actually, she's filed 17 complaints since last night. Mails, letters, photos of your yard. She's been calling us nonstop. We're only here because she threatened to sue. Jake, who'd wandered over with a mug of coffee, snorted. She's escalating. I like it. I crossed my arms. And what's the problem, exactly? Tom grimaced. She says your bikes are a safety hazard and attracting criminal activity. I blinked. Attracting criminal activity? What? Are bike thieves running a cartel in Willow Creek now? A woman on the board, Sarah, muttered. She claims large gatherings of unattended bicycles encourage lawlessness. Jake wheezed into his coffee. I rubbed my forehead. You don't actually believe this, do you? Tom shook his head. No, but we have to address it because she filed it under the dispute resolution process. Can we just write something saying you'll consider MOVYing them? I smirked. Sure. Sarah handed me a clipboard. I scribbled, so I will consider doing absolutely nothing. Signed, the bike guy. Saw she glanced at it, shrugged, and tucked it away. Good enough. Eleanor, of course, was watching from her window, her face a mask of fury. Tom sighed. Now we file this and hope she drops it. She didn't. That night, I heard a clanking sound outside. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. My bikes were still there, but now they were chained together with a massive padlock, a note dangling from it. Saw consider this a final warning. Bikes will be removed if not addressed immediately. HOA. So I snapped a photo and sent it to Tom with a message. So trespassing and tampering are fine now. Saw. Jake strolled up, peering at the lock. She padlocked your bikes. Yup. He grinned. I say we take this to the next level. And that's exactly what I did. Eleanor had crossed a line literally and figuratively, and I wasn't about to let it slide. I ordered the most absurd bike rack I could find online, a hulking industrial-grade monstrosity designed for a dozen bikes. When arrived, I bolted it to my front lawn, front and center, and filled it with my 2 bikes plus 8 more I borrowed from friends. Then I added a sign. Saw welcome to Eleanor's Community Bike Park. Sponsored by overzealous HOA complaints. Saw. Eleanor lost it. From her window, I saw her pacing, yanking her blinds open and shut like a woman possessed. My phone rang minutes later. Dude, Tom said, sounding exhausted. What the hell did you do? I'm complying, I said innocently. She wanted a bike-free lawn, so I organized them. He sighed. She's filing another complaint about unauthorized bike storage expansion. We don't care, but she won't stop calling. Fine, I said, but I've got a condition. An hour later, Tom and the board showed up at Eleanor's door. I watched from my porch as they handed her a formal warning for trespassing and tampering. She shrieked. I was enforcing guidelines. Tom shook his head. Tampering with someone's property isn't in the rules. She pointed at my yard. He turned it into a bike lot. Tom shrugged. Nothing against a bike rack. Oh, and since you're so keen on aesthetics, we've scheduled a full inspection of Sawyer's Sawhouse next week. Eleanor's face went pale, then purple. She slammed the door so hard her porch light flickered. Jake turned to me, grinning. You just got Eleanor to trigger her own inspection. Never start a war you can't win, I said. For weeks, she went quiet, no complaints, no measuring tapes, no caution tape. Then one morning, I saw it. A saw for sale saw sign in her yard. I stood there, coffee in hand, savoring the VY Tory. As she peeled out of the driveway days later, tires squealing, I planted one last sign. Saw goodbye, Eleanor. May your next neighborhood have fewer bikes. Saw. Peace returned to Willow Creek. The great bike war was over, and I'd won. But every time I ride past her empty house, I can't help but smile. Who knew a simple bike could topple a tyrant? If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.